So today we're going to make a Dying Light Dropkick sort of feature where you can just send an enemy flying. Here's how it's going to look by the end of the video. So yeah, there we have it. Hey everyone, today is day 2 of recreating popular game mechanics. This week, Dying Light: The Beast came out. I've played the first Dying Light, didn't play the second one, but I loved the first one a lot as a Mirror's Edge player. I love all of the parkour elements, and of course I love smashing zombies' faces in, so I was excited to get this game. But today I am looking to recreate the dropkick mechanic. I have a little clip of me dropkicking a zombie off a building, and it's just super satisfying. It feels really good, and it's just fun. This feature's been in since the first game, and it's the first skill that you can unlock. One of the first skills you unlock in Dying Light: The Beast, because they know how fun this mechanic is. So I wanted to see if I can recreate it in our game. So let's go ahead and give it a try. So we're gonna need a couple of things first. We need an animation, and then we're gonna need also a character that we can drop kick. Right now our enemy is this box, so we're gonna actually need to get or make it a skeletal mesh that we can ragdoll. So there's a free website called Mixamo that I can grab free animations from. So I'm going to need a couple of things. First, I need to grab a Mixamo skeleton. So to do that, I am going to download the Y-bot character. And I'm also going to grab a dropkick animation. So luckily they have this one for me. So as you can see in the animation, the character is actually moving a little bit, which ain't so great for us because there's a little something called root motion animations that do use, they move the capsule of the character as the animation moves, but Mixamo does not give us root motion in the animation. So we're gonna have to download a plugin that converts the animation to a root motion animation. And luckily we have one of those for free. So anyways, getting ahead of myself, but I'll download this guy. I downloaded a plugin that lets me basically convert these animations to root motion animations. So let's go ahead and here. All I have to do is follow the instructions on my screen. So I have to put my animation, or both my character mesh that I downloaded and the animation, in this incoming FBX folder. So let me just plop those in there. We got Y-bot, and then there was dropkick. Alright, now they show up in here, and I can convert the animations. And that's it. Now they're in this outgoing FBX box, and I can just drag these guys into my project. So let's make a new folder in our project. We'll call it Mixamo. And I'll make a folder for the mesh, and a folder for the animations, because maybe we'll want to have more animations that we grab from Mixamo. So first let's import the mesh. Import this guy. Alright. And let's import the animation. And we'll have to make sure that in this import import window we choose the skeleton that we want to import the animation on. So that will be our Y-bot that we just imported. There we go, and let's preview it, make sure everything is cool. Alright. And it's looking good. But that animation is still only targeted to the Y-bot skeleton. I have to retarget that animation to my Unreal Engine skeleton. Luckily, in Unreal 5.3, I believe, they made Epic made a one-click retargeter, made it super easy. It's not perfect, but I know that it works well with Mixamo to Unreal Engine skeleton. So we're just gonna do that real quick. All I have to do is right-click this animation sequence, retarget the animation. My target skeletal mesh is Quinn. That's the skeletal mesh that lives in my third-person character folder, or third-person character blueprint. Let's see. Yes, Quinn. Let's pull that window back up, and we can do auto generate retargeter, and then we'll just choose Dropkick, and we'll export that animation. And let's put it in our Mixamo folder. So now that we've got that, let me just rename things. I'll call this Ybot Dropkick, and then we'll call this UE5 Dropkick, just so we know which one is the retargeted one. Alright, my recording stopped, but let's get caught up. So since the recording stopped, I'm having to backtrack a little bit, but I basically, once I imported that animation and I retargeted it, I just separated them into two different folders. So I have my new retargeted Dropkick animation on top of my UE skeleton. So let's check it out and see if it looks okay. It does. Awesome. So how do we actually play this animation on our character? We have to create a montage from our animation sequence. To do that, I'll just right click it and I will say create in a montage, and I'll call it AM Dropkick. AM stands for animation montage. And what this does essentially is montages are what you call to play on the character. Play montage is a function on the character. That's how you play their animation sequences given an input. Animation sequences you use for just like things like movement, things that are always playing based on your constant inputs or lack of constant inputs. Montages are usually used for specific actions. So in the montage, you can add events that get called at certain points in the animation. So let's say I wanted like a beam to fire out of his foot at this frame. I can add a anim notify here that gets called at that frame that would shoot a beam out. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's just play this animation on our character. Let's get it to play on our character. So to do that, now that we have our montage, we can go back into our character. And I have an attack input action from my last video. This gets triggered whenever you hit left click on the mouse or right trigger on the gamepad. So let's say I just want the dropkick to play on this input. I'll just select my dropkick for the montage to play, and let's test it out. Bam. That looks pretty cool. Problem is, this animation, so once you're in it, you can't move, and so it kind of makes the player immobile for about 2 or 3 seconds. And Dying Light does 2 things. Number 1, you can only do a drop kick when you're in the air, and number 2, it doesn't play this whole wind-up sequence. It kind of just shoots the legs out of the character right away. Go back over my example clip. The dude just kind of kicks his legs out right in front of him right away. So that's how we want our animation to be. So let's edit our animontage to sort of resemble that. So let's pretend that our character is already right here in the air. He's already jumping. And let's edit these start time and end times. So I think maybe about 1 second into it, it looks like is when he starts to kick out his legs, and then he kind of winds down a little bit too long. So maybe we set the end time to like 2.5 seconds. Okay, and then we can set the blend time. So blend in, I think a quarter of a second is pretty good, but I'll ease it in. And then the blend out time, let's just see how that looks. Let's try this out. Alright, I think you should blend out a little bit sooner. So let's make the end time a little bit shorter. There we go. That is better. Okay. Now our problem is we want to disallow the player from drop kicking unless they're in the air, and that's pretty easy. So to do that, let's grab our character movement component, and we'll just do an is falling check. Plug this in here, plug this in there, and if this is true, we'll play the montage. Alright, let's test that out. I'm clicking left click, I'm hitting right on the gamepad, nothing's happening. If I jump and I click, it works. Alright, so we got that down. Perfect. Alright, so we have our animation in place. We have it functioning the way we sort of want it to. Now we have to actually add an enemy that we can kick, and B, create some sort of collision check to see if we did collide with an enemy. So let's make the enemy first. I'm gonna edit this box right here. We'll make him a character, an actual character that we can interact with. So let's do it. I am going to reparent my enemy class to a character. Just a regular character. Alright. And what that does is it gives him a mesh component. And so I think we'll just use the same skeletal mesh as yeah, let's just use this this basic one. I'll bring him down here and I'll rotate him 90 degrees. Alright, let's check that out. Cool. Perfect. Here's our enemy. So now we've got our dude. Now he needs to actually, well, let's actually give him an animation blueprint. So maybe we'll make him the same as our current third-person character, just so that he has some sort of idle animation. There we go. Alright. Now, to do a collision check, let's try to just see what happens if I can make a collision check where I just run into the enemy and he reacts to it. So let's look at our capsule component in our character and see what the collision settings are. Type in collision. Alright, so he's set to block pretty much everything, including pawns. So if we simulate generates hit events, so on our capsule component, if we hit this on component hit event down here, it'll create an event for us that gets fired whenever our character's capsule touches something that is set to block. So any of these items. So let's first test out if we can actually detect a collision in general. So we'll cast to our enemy, and if this happens, we'll just fire off a print string. Alright, let's see if that's going to get fired. And it does. Getting all those messages. Perfect. Now, now that we know that it's actually working, we can say get mesh on the enemy, and then there's a function called simulate physics. So set simulate physics just basically sends the character right into a ragdoll state. So let's see what happens. So he moved to the floor because our enemy probably doesn't have any collision settings, doesn't have good collision settings set on his on his body. So we're gonna have to change his collision settings up. Let's do custom collisions. We'll just block. We need collision enabled. Okay. Now let's see what happens. There we go. I went flying because I changed the wrong setting. I don't want him to block the pawn. He should block everything else though. Let's see again. Alright, there we go. So obviously that's not quite correct. I'm getting blocked right here because his capsule component is still active, but I don't collide with his body, so there are some other things that we have to change, obviously. But we can see that our collision is working. So let's see. Now let's try to get the character to maybe get blown back when I touch it. So let's see here. We can apply an impulse, add impulse, and we'll just add an impulse to his pelvis. And let's get the characters, or rather the mesh's forward rotation. His forward rotation. Hit forward vector, and then let's negate that. So we're getting his backwards vector. And if we multiply that by a certain amount, we should add some force in his backwards direction. Let's just do something crazy like 5,000. And let's see what happens here. Okay. And he'll keep getting an impulse added because I'm touching his capsule, which is invisible, like right here. Alright, so that's sort of working. I think I needed to use his right vector, actually. I'll negate that. Because his right vector is actually his forward vector in this case, for this mesh. Let's find out. Okay, so instead of using the enemy's mesh, I'm just grabbing the forward vector of the enemy's capsule and negating it to get his backwards vector. And that seems to work. The reason he's flying back like that is because it's activating the event multiple times and adding multiple impulses. So we will have to limit it to just one. To do that, let's just turn off collisions on the enemy's capsule as soon as he's touched. So we'll get his capsule component. We will set collision enabled, and we will set it to false, or rather no collision. Alright, now let's test that out again. Perfect, that is much better. Let's do that one more time. Bam. Alright, but the problem with this implementation is that if I hit him from the back, he flies backwards. If I hit him from the side, he flies backwards. So I actually want him to go in the direction of my character, my forward-facing vector. So instead of all this, let's grab my own forward vector. And let's try that again. Perfect. There we go. We got a little ragdoll going on. Perfect. Okay, cool. So we've got our character getting blasted back, but we want that to activate only when the dropkick animation is playing, and maybe only at a certain time during the animation. So let's do this. I'm going to go into my dropkick. I think that the ragdoll should only get activated when my character is maybe at this point in the animation, and after that he shouldn't be able to send the enemy into ragdoll anymore. So we're gonna have to make an anim notify state to do that. And so anim notify state is basically just it has a start and an end window. So anytime during that window, the ragdoll function can get activated on the enemy. So let's make one of those guys. Let's go into our content folder. Let's just make a new folder called anim notifies. I will have to make a new blueprint class. I'll make a new blueprint class, and I'll type in anim notify state, and there it is. Cool. We'll call that ans underscore dropkick animation, dropkick activation, dropkick toggle, excuse me. Okay. We'll open that guy up. And there's a couple of functions in here that I can override. So first one would be receive, notify, begin. So that's when the start window happens, when the dropkick ragdoll should first get activated. So let's see here. Let's say during this time we set a Boolean value on our character that says yes. If we're colliding with the enemy, the dropkick should send the enemy into ragdoll. So to do that, we have to get a reference to our character. So let's get the owner of our mesh. We will cast to... that was my controller disconnecting. We'll cast to our third person character. And we don't have a Boolean value in our character yet that tells us whether or not we're dropkicking. So let's make one. Let's go down in our variables. We can type, let's say, the is dropkicking. Sure. Default value will be set to false. We'll go back in our anim notify state, and we'll set our b is dropkicking function, or Boolean, to true. And now we have to unset this once the animation window is over. So I'll override another event called received notify end, and I'll just copy paste this stuff over. And instead of is dropkicking is true, we'll set it to false. Alright, now how do we actually use this anim notify state? If we go back into our montage and down into our little notifies area down here, we can add a new notify state. So mine that we just made pops up here, and now we can drag the start and end point to wherever we want. So let's say I want the start point to be, and this cursor just isn't working. Let's say I want the ragdoll to be allowed to be activated right here in the animation, starting right here, and then ending. Come on. I guess right here. We'll try that. So at any point during this window, the dropkick will actually send the enemy into ragdoll. Back in our third person character, let's check if we are drop kicking. So if we're not drop kicking, I'll say not active. If we are, I will say active. And let's see what happens. I'll jump and I'll drop kick, and I missed. Right, so this isn't working because I don't think the capsule is actually touching the enemy while we're doing our dropkick animation. Instead of having my character's mesh overlap the enemy, let's actually make like a couple of collisions that activate on the legs of my character that kind of extend outwards a little bit to help the dropkick. Because the animation itself it was not super easy to touch the character with the foot. You have to be pretty precise, and only one foot fully extends out. In Dying Light, pretty much, it seems like if you're even near the enemy, they kind of just go flying. It'll send them into ragdoll. So we kind of have to help the player a little bit in this case. So we will do a couple things. We will go back into our viewport, and let's start putting some custom collisions on our mesh. So let's first do this. We will look at our mesh. Let's add a capsule. I didn't add it. Let's add a capsule collision, and let's attach it to the left and right calf. So I'll do the left one first, and I'll just kind of rotate it so that it actually fits. I'll size it to the leg's actual size. Let me unhook the anchor for scaling. And there we go. Alright. Can always change this around, but I think for now we're pretty good. Okay, we're gonna have to change the collisions of our capsules, and we're actually gonna start with them with no collision. Having collision capsules checking constantly for overlaps or for blocking hits is pretty expensive, so we only want them to activate while we are performing the dropkick. So we want generate overlaps to fire off, but let's create a custom preset here. So let's just set everything to ignore for now, and then we want the capsules to overlap with the pawn, or with, yeah, just with the pawn. So that's it for the collision. We can do a similar thing that we're doing here, where we're creating this event and checking if we're dropkicking. Instead of getting on component begin overlap for each one and making an event, one of these events for each one, let's just on begin play, let's grab all of our capsules and let's make an array here. And for each of these, from my for loop, so for each of our collision capsules, if I say bind event to on begin overlap, and do that, we can add, or rather create an event, and then we can create a matching function. So what that will do is it'll get every single input parameter that exists on our on component begin overlap function, or event rather, and it'll just basically copy them onto this function here. So we can call this function, which now exists down here, we can call this function, alright, my recording stopped again, but what I did was I named this function down here detect enemy for ragdoll. I copy pasted the logic I had in my overlap event from my mesh into this function, and I went into my anim notify state, and for my on begin, my notify begin function, instead of setting that boolean variable for is dropkicking to true and false, I'm just enabling collisions on all of my leg collisions on begin, and then setting them to no collision at the end of the anim notify state. So I actually don't need that boolean variable anymore, and for that is dropping boolean variable, so I got rid of it and deleted deleted it from my third person character. So now what should happen is, while I'm dropkicking, those capsules will activate, and then they'll deactivate at the end of my little window here. And we can actually visualize that. Let's do it. Let's go in my for loop in here. I will say set visibility, and I'll make it visible. And then also, let's set hidden in game to false. And then I'll do the inverse of this in the end function. So visibility false, hidden true. And let's see. It's kind of hard to see. You know what, to make it easier, let's actually do this. I'll make a quick input function rather, keyboard enter. There's a pretty handy function called set global time dilation, which basically just makes you go in slow motion. So we'll do a flip-flop node here, and the first time you touch it, it'll be set to half speed, and then the second time you touch it, it'll be set to full speed. So basically just flip-flops in between these two. So let's see. I will go into slow motion, and I'll jump, I'll do my drop kick, and you can kind of see. Here, I'll make it even easier to see. Let's slow this down even more, and let's actually set the thickness of these to something even greater, like 1. Alright, let's check this out. There we go. So they get activated, and then they get deactivated, you can see. So let's check this out in slow-mo. Let's see if we can do this right. I think that looks pretty good for now. There we go. So yeah, and then I'll just toggle off these visibility channels. It's not quite tuned, but it used to be a little easier to drop kick. You know what? I'm not done yet. I don't want the character to move backwards like this. So we're actually going to do one more thing. We are going to add a special component to our third person character. Let's add the motion warping component. Warp? No, motion. Alright, so forgot to add a plugin into my editor called motion warping. This lets you modify the rotation and location of your root motion animation, pretty much. So I've added that. I had to restart my editor, and now in my character blueprint I can add this component, motion warping, and basically we have to add another, it kind of serves as like an anim notify state, so we have to add another window in our montage that says, okay, from this frame to this frame, warp the character to this location. So let's go back in our montage, and we basically want the character to warp a little bit forwards from maybe the beginning of the animation to right here at the end of the animation, or maybe like right here. So let's add another track, and let's say add notify state, motion warping. Let's just bring this here, and up here in the details panel, we need to give this warp target a name. So let's call it Dropkick Location. And all this other stuff is fine. I don't want to rotate him yet. And that's good. So that's all we need to do for that. Let's go back in our character, and when we attack, when we do our dropkick, we need to get our motion warping component and call, let's see, it's add or update warp target from location. And we have to use the same warp target name that we set here. So it was dropkick location. Okay, so it knows, which animation we're playing and which target to focus on. And for the target location, let's just bring our character forwards a little bit once we start doing the dropkick. So let's just get the actor location, and we will add this. We will add this to the actor's forward vector, and we'll multiply that by, let's say, 100, which is 1 meter. 1 meter goes by meters. Okay, let's see how that fares. So you can't really tell, but let's set it to something let's set it to something ridiculous like 1,000, just so we can test it out. There we go. Some matrix stuff, so you can tell that it's actually working. Let's set this to something like 150 for now. Yeah, that feels pretty good. You can see he's moving forwards during the kick. Alright, cool. We can also, instead of moving him forwards, we can actually move him to the enemy's location. I have a function here that checks for enemy. It does a little line trace. This is what I made in the last video. So what if we actually do this line trace, and if we detect the enemy, we will say get the enemy's location and warp to it. Otherwise, if we don't detect an enemy, we'll do that just a little burst forwards. So let's see how that looks. I have to go up here. Let me bring this guy back down here. Alright, let's check this out. Nice. That looks much better. Nice. That's great. It's like a flying dragon kick. Let me do this in slow-mo. Okay. Problem is, if you jump up too early, it doesn't bring you right to him. Also, you can also do this from all the way over here. Which is pretty cool, but not quite great for gameplay. So if I want to fix that, I would have to clamp my line trace so that you can't, do it from across the way over here. But that is pretty fun, I gotta say. Let's do this. Let's add a parameter to our check for enemy function. So we'll say distance, max distance. By default, I'm gonna leave it at 5,000 so it doesn't break my other logic, but I will set it to something else for this. And let's visualize this too. Okay, so I will set the max distance to like 150, which is our maybe like 300. Let's do 300, and let's see how that looks. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, yeah. So that doesn't reach unless I'm close. I think it should be a little closer. I think it should be a little more lenient. Let's make it more lenient. How about 500? There we go. That's pretty good. I like that. I kind of want to change the jump. My character's jump. It's kind of floaty and it's kind of hard to hit the enemy. Here we go. Let's go into our character movement component. How does our jump velocity change things? Makes it go really high, so let's make it go lower. Let's do maybe see how 200 feels. Oops. See how 200 feels. That's not enough. Let's try out 350. That feels better. Feels more natural. Nice. There we go. That's great. Nice. That makes it a lot easier, actually. I missed. There we go. Alright, I need to fix that too, because the capsule collision is colliding with the character mesh, which is making me pop up. Let's not block physics bodies. That's what's going on. There we go. And let's not block physics bodies on this. Or pawn. Alright, let's see if we get that issue. There we go. Okay, it's also blocking my camera. That's why I was doing that. I don't want it to block the camera. I don't want the mesh to block the camera, rather. Let's try this again. There we go. Perfect. Alright. Nice. Okay, one last thing I want to do is if I'm facing this way and doing a drop kick. Ooh, actually, another thing. So, two more things. If I'm facing a different way and doing a drop kick, I want him to sort of rotate around to do the drop kick. And also, if I keep on spamming left click while I'm in the air, as long as I'm falling, it'll reset our drop kicking animation. I don't want that to happen. So an easy fix for that would be here on my attack. It's getting a little bit crowded, but on my attack input here, let's check from our mesh. I think I have to actually get the anim instance. To get the anim instance and get current active montage. And if this is not valid, then we'll allow ourselves to do this. So not bool. So let's check. Are we falling? And are we playing a montage? Are we not playing a montage? If we are playing a montage, then we don't want to be able to do our dropkick. So let's see if that fixed it. I'm gonna spam, I'm gonna spam left click when I'm in the air, and it didn't work. It was only one, it only let me do one drop kick, so that's perfect. That fixed that. There we go. And okay, and the last thing I wanted to do was rotate my character around when I am doing my dropkick based on my facing location. I want it to rotate so he's facing forwards based on where our camera is pointed. So let's see here. To do that, let's get our follow camera. We're gonna get the rotation of our camera, and then we'll from here we'll get the yaw. Yeah. And then into our I'm gonna have to change our warp thing here, but we're gonna have to do a couple things. First, in our montage, we'll have to allow warp rotation, and then back in our character, instead of using update or warp target from location, we'll have to do add warp from location and rotation. Let me just rename this warp target name to Dropkick. Makes it easier for me. There we go. Okay. Oops. We can go back here. Okay. Alright, so our rotation needs to be, first of all, if we don't detect an enemy, can I just do this? Let's find out. Yes. Yep. That actually did it. So he's rotating. Looks kind of silly, but we're just giving the character the camera's rotation so that he kind of rotates back towards where we're facing. So I don't have to like only be facing forwards to perform our drop kick. It looks kind of stupid, but that's how it's gonna have to be for now. Alright, and then our other situation would be, I guess we could keep it that way, but we could also do this. We can find the look at rotation, and we can do the look at rotation between the enemy and our character. If we detect an enemy, that is. We have to change just the yaw. Also, this is mixed up. Find look at rotation from our character to the enemy. That's what we needed. And that should do it. So let's turn around. There we go. There we go. So that kind of helps our character a little bit more. So warping doesn't happen in Dying Light. You kind of just do the thing. You drop kick, and it's pretty lenient. If there's an enemy even remotely near you, it'll hit them. But since we're in third person, we kind of have to help the character. The main thing was that we needed to boost our character forwards during the drop kick instead of having him move backwards. But yeah, I mean, there you have it. There's our drop kick. It feels pretty fun. It feels good to do. And it looks decent. So yeah, that's my Dying Light Dropkick feature in our game. So if any of you are watching and you have an idea of, or you have a mechanic that you love from a different game that you'd like to see me recreate, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just keep doing my thing. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.